Got 20 seconds. Come on, Amanda, go.
Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Good. Get those knees up. Explode. Good. Explode. Let's go. Up.
Rock forward. Let's go. One more. Go.
You are listening to the Fight Strength Podcast with your hosts, Phil Daru and Jason Burgos.
Hello, MMA and fitness true believers, and welcome to episode 12, the Dirty Dozen of the Fight Strength Podcast. I am that guy, Jason Burgos, senior editor for MMAJA.com, and with me, as always, is the man himself, the bearded wonder of strength and conditioning, and the mastermind helping to forge some amazing athletes at American Top Team. He is Phil Daru. Phil, what is going on tonight?
What's up, brother? I am good. You know,
You're tired, yo.
my voice is a little hoarse.
Yelling at people today at ATT?
had about 11 guys in my 5.
Oof, wow, 11. How do you train 11 dudes at once and it's not like on a field with a set play?
You're right. I don't know. I'm pretty good at it, obviously. No, it's good. As long as you have systems in place, you can just plug and go. And, obviously breaking up into different groups per depending on who's, how far they're out, where they're at in fight camp. And then, from there, you kind of group them up depending on where their fights are. So as long as the systems are in place and methods are ready to go, then you just kind of plug and go ahead. But, obviously keeping them safe and all of that, making sure that they're doing everything correct is the main key. Yeah. But other than that, all the program is ready to go. And then after that, just a long day in general. I've been grinding 18 hours. I don't stop, never do.
18 hours. That's like old school. That's like the story you hear about. Oh, my father was driving the bus 18 hours. And that's a damn 18 hours. My goodness.
Yeah, and it's gonna go into my motivational quote too.
Oh, all right. Well, you people can't wait for that. Now, on tonight's show, I'm excited to say, finally, the journalists will outnumber the jocks, as we will have the pleasure of having on one of the best MMA writers of the last decade, and that is the one and only Chuck Mindenhall. Phil, are you a little scared to be outnumbered by a couple of crafty writers on episode 12 of the podcast?
I'm never scared, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I'm not really worried about it, man. Me and Luke Thomas are close. That's my boy. So if I need to call some backup, I'll just call Luke and we'll make it happen. We can do it. We can do a 2-on-2. You know what I'm saying? We can make it a basketball court, whatever you want to do.
That would be just a slaying a basketball. Because one, Luke Thomas is tall, and like you, he likes to pick things up and put them back down. I would not want to deal with the post game of you two.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good.
All right, now. Well, before we get to Mr. Mindenhall later in the show, we have an interview that we're going to play for you recorded. We will first get into our weekly Ask Daru segment, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our show can be listened to and downloaded on iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Google Play Music, and YouTube. We're all over the board. Whatever way you need to listen, you can listen to the show. Please give us a rating, comment, and share if you dig the show. Just get it out there, please. We're most appreciative of that. Now, our Ask Daru segment is sponsored by the Daru Strong Training Systems. If you want to live healthier and a stronger life like a pro athlete, you need to start using the systems. I mean, it's just as simple as that. But Phil is not just a high-level trainer of starfighters with his own training ideologies. He's also a man willing to drop motivational words for those in search of it. Now, Aristotle, I mean Phil. Phil's not Aristotle. What do you have for us tonight to motivate the many people out there?
All right. So since it's the start of the week, I'm going to go ahead and tell the people this. It's time to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, a lot of the times I see people going through their day, somewhat of, I just want to do things that make me feel good, or maybe I shouldn't do that because I'm not feeling too well today. But at the end of this whole segment, at the end of your life, you have to take into account of what you did on a daily basis. And did you push yourself each and every day to make yourself that much better? And the only way to progress and succeed is to put yourself into uncomfortable situations and then progress from there. That's all I got today.
Wow. I'm going to give that an amen, brother. Amen. Now, I mean, after it's hard to follow something up like that, but I'm going to do a little plugging myself now after following that. I'd like to mention on PWP Nation, I have a story up covering some wrestling-related stuff. Also, it's a mix of wrestling and political. You guys go look out there. I also want to thank them. They're going to be publishing some of our older episodes soon with, I believe it's going to be with King Mo and Dustin Poirier. They're going to get us out there a little bit, help us out. Also, I want to take the time to thank MMA Uno and Jim Edwards from MMA Uno for covering our stories, getting us a little shine out there on his websites, sharing, getting us out there. Most appreciated to those guys. Big thank you. Now for our Ask the Roo segment, a little different than the usual. We're going with now for it's going to be an in-house question for Phil. That question is, can he break down and explain what Conor McGregor why he may have fatigued during the fight with Floyd Mayweather on Saturday night? There was a clear moment in the fight around maybe the fourth, fifth round when he started to definitely was breathing heavy from the mouth and fatigued, and he mentioned in the post-fight interviews, several of them, that it's an issue he's had ongoing in his career and that he can sometimes get through it. He mentioned that he had an issue in training, that he would get to about the 8th, 9th round, start getting tired, then somewhere around 10th, 11th, he would regain it. Now, so what were your thoughts? What would your expert analysis? You understand the body, you train high-level athletes. What were your thoughts on why he might have fatigued and what he can do better so he doesn't have those moments where he fatigues in a fight and it's become a characteristic of himself?
Yeah, and I hit on this in this week's newsletter that I sent out. But if you really break down the whole fight in general, and what I've said before, and what I was thinking about when I seen Conor walking out to the ring, was that he looked like he felt really uneasy, and that he looked like he was in a different element. He was out of his element and such, and that he was a little nervous. He looked a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. He looked a little tentative. He didn't understand, how to act or how to be. So this could play a big role. Now, going on into the fight, as I started to watch it and break it down, I started to see Conor breathing through his mouth heavily. Mm-hmm. And it started to go as early as the 3rd round. He started to breathe out of his mouth, and, through his mouth, taking shallow breaths. So in and out, using up all of his stored glycogen. Now, once this happens, your body goes into fermentation. This kicking on into anaerobic respiration. This could lead into, the energy needed causing lactic acid buildup. And this will make Conor throw his hands like he was pretty much in water from rounds 6 through 9. Yeah. So another key factor for some people saying that, maybe it was the weight cut. We seen a problem with him when he had this, had the same problem when he fought Diaz, and there was no weight problem there. He didn't even cut weight. Yeah. So that may not be that issue. And, we all know the training that they did over at the UFC Performance Institute. And I'm not saying that these guys are doing anything wrong. I know those guys over there, and they're pretty knowledgeable. They understand the game. But you have to take into account one thing. He got nervous. Now,
would you say it's comparable? I've seen a lot of fighters, and you may have experiences with the fighters you train, that they have UFC jitters. Like Daniel Cormier admitted it in his first fight with Frank Mir. Do you think he maybe, despite his fame and what he's been through, he had big fight boxing jitters and it sapped him a little bit?
Possibly. I mean, listen, it's a different atmosphere. It's a whole lot riding on the line. He's the first to ever do it. Yeah. There's a lot of things. And even though Conor, pretty much views himself as a god, as a king, he's still a man. I believe when McGregor feels he can't hurt somebody, he begins to panic, causing his heart rate to spike and his breathing to become more sporadic. So there's a number of factors here that you can even make a point of, him only doing aerobic conditioning, and for this camp, and no anaerobic conditioning whatsoever. This may or may not be true, and whatever the facts are. But regardless, it is what it is at this point.
Now, have you ever heard of anything like that? Like, I appreciate Conor in that when he's doing his promos, it's ridiculous. I can't stand it sometimes. But whenever he does his post-fight interviews, especially in the occasion that he's lost, he's very honest. He's very detailed. He comes across as very smart, gives real, legitimate answers. And the fact that he came out with this, you know, he was worried about that in training for this fight, going, you know, the 12 rounds, and that he had the issue of getting tired midway, but he would come through. Have you ever encountered that with guys you've trained, or even yourself, you know, because you're a high-level athlete yourself, that you can fatigue and then come through the end, even though you're not stopping, you're not resting, you're still in the midst of this competition, that you can have this second win? You know, for me, the novice, is that normal? Is that just something unique to his physiology? Have you ever heard of anything like that?
I hate to say this like I'm beating it over the head with a drum, but I honestly think that it has something to do with his mental capacity of thinking that he can't get past a certain amount of rounds. Yeah. Okay. So at the end of it, what comes after round 7 or what comes after round 9? That's a 5-by-5 minute round, right? Yeah. So he's done in MMA. Like that's already done. Yeah. So now in his head, he's like, all right, this is the longest I've ever had to go on. Let's see if I can keep this pace up. And then that's when the anxiety starts to kick in of, can I keep this going? Can I keep this going? And then in sparring, he's able to man it up and get through it because let's face it, man, sparring's not a fight. Right. If you're a fighter, you understand this concept. There's not a lot on the line in sparring. So yeah, you can probably get through it if, you know, you have good mental capacity to withstand some anxiety, some nervousness, some thought of not finishing, or in this case, mental fatigue, causing the body to kind of shut down in a sense. And you can get a second win, quote unquote, through clearing out the anxiety, clearing out your mind, knowing that you can get to the finish line. Yeah. And I think that he does that at certain times. And he probably did that in the Diaz fight, you know, because he wanted that win that bad. Yeah. Where he knew he had to do whatever it took to make it through that 5th round. Right. You know, so from a scientific standards, from that aspect, I could say that, you know, if he trained a little bit more anaerobically and understood how to clear out lactic a little bit more efficiently, learn how to move while he was tired, and kind of coast, and have the ability to stay in aerobic threshold, in aerobic capacity, while being able to throw short bursts of energy through his training. You know, a lot of the times we'll do short bursts of anaerobic activity, 6 to 10 seconds of explosive, you know, energy, leading by slow aerobic work, or in this case, if you were to put it into a true exercise regiment, we would do, you know, sprints with the prowler, which is a sled, for 6 to 10 seconds. And then as they would wait for about 10 to 20 seconds, they would do very low energy shadow boxing, kind of moving around. It kind of simulates fight sequences as they go to explode through a combination, and then they can move around, trying to, you know, feel out the ring, just kind of circle around and stay active enough to where your opponent's not going to come attack you. And you do this in bouts. You can do this for as long as you feel that is necessary to help with the stimulus response, or you can do it for 3 5-minute rounds or 5 5-minute rounds, however long you're going to fight in a sense. But there's, like I said, MMA is totally different from boxing. Right. Boxing, 2 aerobic systems. You have anaerobic, you have aerobic. You know, it's not a lot of lactic, right? Unless you're counting on throwing punches and it getting parried and blocked to where you have to withstand load or force being put back upon you. Other than that, I don't feel it's you need to really worry about too much strength endurance and things like that. But like I said, the sport is different. The skills work that he had to do was different. You know, all of the things that he did for this camp, he had to flip it, you know, or he flipped it because of what he was doing beforehand. You know, and now he's not juggling 5 plates at a time. He's just juggling 1. Yep. And I don't think it was enough time to actually fully prepare for somebody at that high quality of a fighter or high quality of a boxer to go in there and make something happen. You know, when Floyd's been fighting and boxing since he was a kid.
Yep.
You know, there's time under that, and you can't just do a fight camp for, you know, whatever 10 to 8 weeks and think that you're going to be in the same amount of shape, sport specific wise, as a guy that's been doing it since he was a little kid.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the mental stuff. I mean, this is, you know, why our show is special, and you have a great understanding of the sport. You fought in the sport, you've trained these fighters, and it shows you how important the mental aspect of the game is, and how the mental can truly affect your body. I mean, and you know, per example of the mental, as even though these two seem like they are mental, is the Diaz brothers, how they can grind and push through certain situations. Like I remember the first Conor fight, there was a clear point late in that fight where Nate pretty much went to his well of rage, and he got a second win, and it was pure mental, gutted through. He hurt Conor, and we all know what happened. I mean, another good example is this weekend too. It got overshadowed by the mammoth size of Mayweather versus McGregor. Was Miguel Cotto fought Kamagai this weekend, and that was a straight up phone booth in the face, you know, kind of fight that it takes mental fortitude. That's not something for the weak at heart. And you know, I think that's an excellent point you bring up, and it makes a lot of sense, you know, that may have been, because considering that for some analysts scoring cards, he won 3 of the 4 first rounds, at least a couple of the first few rounds. So to tire and lose something because he was mentally draining himself leading up to it, and then he knew once I hit a certain point, okay, it's getting near that round, would I get tired? Oh no, and he's taking himself out of it. It actually has tons of plausibility, and that's why you are Phil Daru, the bearded wonder.
Exactly.
All right. Now, this is the end of our Ask the Roost segment. Now, on to our guest. We recorded this interview a little earlier, so we're going to jump right into it after the introduction. I'm excited to have this man on, as I have been an admirer of his work for a long time. He has covered the sport of MMA for a decade. The coverage included writing for ESPN, Fight, and currently he's doing work for MMAfighting.com and TheRinger.com. He is a regular on the panel for the show The MMA Beat, which features other notable MMA press members like Ariel Helwani and Luke Thomas. He has been dubbed the Man in the Hat, and I'm happy to say he's a fellow Mixed Martial Arts Journalists Association member, throwing up the MMAJA gang signs, and that man is Chuck Mindenhall, and here's our interview, and here it goes. I have a good juicy question for you now. Your MMA Beat co-host Luke Thomas had a very awkward moment at a press event leading up to UFC 214. He asked Jon Jones a question, and Jones just straight up denied giving him an answer and told Thomas he didn't like him. First of all, what were your thoughts when that happened? And 2, have you ever had a difficult moment with the fighter similar to that, and in the years you've been covering the sport?
Not a public one, not like that. Like so that, and honestly, I've had some struggles with. Not big time struggles, but with Malky, about Jon Jones. There's been some things with me too. And I always wonder, like, if I'm there, would I've got the same treatment? I have no idea, man. I don't know if he was, because we commonly break him down, obviously on the MMA Beat. We talk about his ongoing problems, but Luke, in my mind, has always been very fair, I think, with his assessment of where Jones is. And part of the mantra of the Beat is to be honest, try to give honest opinions. And, I think all of us have seen how things have played out with Jon Jones, so it's very difficult to remain positive about Jon Jones over the course of time. And I think we've all, I think we've all been very critical of him. So I don't know if it's just Luke. I don't know if he kind of just doesn't like any of us. Or how far down that rabbit hole goes. But it told me a little bit about Jon Jones. Like, he pays attention. He always has. I think he pays attention way more than we realize to things that are written about him, things that are said about him. And he's going to have to deal with that for a long time more if this whole thing goes down.
Oh, my God, yes.
It almost seems like he likes the attention of having that persona.
It's brutal, though, man. I just coming. It's the utter fall from grace, man. I mean, the guy... youngest champion. Remember, he was saving somebody right before his fight with Shogun Rua in jersey and just to pastor son and all this, to go from that to where he's at now, it's almost hard to it almost feels like it would be fake. If somebody told you that storyline, you'd be like, oh, it's just Hollywood making up some crazy thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you never see somebody that's at, like, it's not like we've seen a bunch of times a talent where, he had all the talent in the world and he got, went offside somewhere and he never reached his potential. No, he's reached his potential a couple of times now. And the only thing I could ever think of, because he's going to be marked by this in a weird way, like, the only comparison I can make, because it was hard and his name may not be perfect, but I thought of, like, Sammy Sosa McGuire. Like, they're going to be thought of as legends, great fighters, but they won't be in the place of greats of all time, because they'll just be looked at as that asterisk of what really they were doing, and it's going to hurt their name and their legend and their lore forever.
What's crazy is, those guys were just, coupled into the cheating side, right? And then you have the partying side. So it's almost like a cross between those guys with Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden. You know what I mean? Which is that's a crazy combo.
Yeah. And still was the greatest ever. Those guys never reached, like, greatest ever. And he's thought of as the greatest ever at 30, despite doing cocaine and winning a fight against one of the other greatest ever. Yeah,
it's true. It's true, man. It's one of those things, man, that you feel, because we're all in this industry, man. You're in this industry, and he helps the industry. If he's clean, if he's doing the things the right way, and he's a mega star in this sport, and it always helps to have that guy in your industry, man, who's just dominating, and everybody's going to pay attention. So it hurts the entire thing. You know what I mean? For him to be that kind of screw up at this point, it hurts all of us on some level. It trickles down all the way to all of us.
Yeah. Now, has there ever, away from people you actually do, don't like, or don't like you, to people you do like, has there ever been a time, because you mentioned you were a fan before you got into writing, where you were a legitimate fan of a particular fighter, and it made being unbiased difficult? Because for example, I know I have that issue with a guy like Daniel Cormier. I'm a big fan. Has there ever been somebody that you write about, like, oh, I gotta play it, even, I can't show my favoritism?
Man, I always loved BJ Penn and Chuck Liddell, like, early on and things like that. But I wouldn't say to the point where because I had been in journalism long enough to kind of know that, you couldn't be overly reverent to skew what you're trying to get at in journalism. And you guys know me as well. I'm not like a typical journalist. I'm more of a columnist / writer. So a lot of times I'm being negative, but I'm trying to just give the truth. So, if I like somebody, but I'm trying to tell the truth, I realize how that's going to be conflicting with my emotions, stuff like that. So I try to stay out of it. Honestly, there hasn't been too many guys I'm in awe of as I've gotten into the writing aspect of it. There's always those guys, though, that you see and you think back, and there is that element. I completely respect so many of these guys, man. But no, not really. It's, the thing for me, man, is like when I think about who kind of really gives me the awe would be writers. Like, if I see writers that I really love, that's when I you have a different kind of admiration. And I guess it's just because that's my profession in the, you know what I mean? So these guys, I look at them, I completely respect everything they do, but I try to keep it real separate. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah. Now, I mean, you've been in this game, you've been with MMA and like I said, writing for MMA and things like that, been a fan for a while. In your opinion, now, where do you see the sport of MMA going in the next 5 years?
Man, that is so tough, because the sport is so untrackable in the end. I mean, I wouldn't have seen. So as I started writing about it, obviously it was in the boom period of, post Tough One, when that whole thing went on, and these guys, all of a sudden, people are paying attention to the sport more so than they were. So I've been a part of it. So we're in this upward trajectory that it's had from that boom period. Now, over the last few years, we've seen it dip and ebb and plateau in lots of different ways, including the Jon Jones thing, where you're just like, wow, we can't catch a break. These guys, you get something good and it goes away again. I think it really just comes down to they've gotten it across to the point where so I work at The Ringer now too. I write for The Ringer, and a lot of the people there are not in the MMA bubble. A lot of people there are just, I can tell you right now, they don't really pay attention to it at all. but there are some who pay attention to it, and I feel like that's kind of still where the sport is. It's gotten to the point where people are not, they don't wince through their fingers when they see it on Fox Sports 1 flipping the channels like they would have before. It's not really regarded as like a blood sport, but on whole, I think the greater majority of people see it as something similar to a sport now, or a niche sport, than they do some kind of like, crazed pursuit. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like all that perception has changed and become a little bit more. We've become more desensitized to it and all that stuff. So I feel like it's in a good place in terms of how we view it as a collective, like on some base level. I feel like it's in a good place. It just really comes down to, can they bring up stars? Can they, generate more stars? What are the new owners going to do with this thing? I mean, there's a lot of this thing with the rankings and the meritocracy and them taking all of that away. On whole, like they're still using it as like the skeleton or scaffolding, or however you want to say it, but we know what they're doing. They're kind of booking these money fights, and it's taken some weird turns, but I still think ultimately, once the owners kind of get a hold of it and they get some more guys coming up and stuff like that, I'm still optimistic. It's still heading upward, Yeah. At least that's my hope, man, because I don't want the sport to have come so far just to at some point kind of die. You know what I mean? I feel like it's just that would be all wrong. I still think that people really love good fights, and that there's probably there's plenty of people out there who haven't really gotten into MMA who would love it if they just give it a chance. So I feel like it's still in that nice spot where it has room to grow. But I think the sport needs stars, and it'd be interesting to see how many people are disgruntled, how many of these fighters remain disgruntled as we go on, because with Conor McGregor making more money and all this stuff, like there's a lot of different dissension now, and we'll just have to see how all that plays out. But on whole, I'm optimistic, man. I think it's still heading upward.
Oh, that's good.
Now, as a young journalist, I envy, as a person trying to get into this particular industry, envy that you had a press row seat, at the circus, the historic circus that was Mayweather McGregor. Now, you've been to a lot of big fights in your time covering the sport. What would you say, what were the similarities in the atmosphere? Was it completely different? Did it feel like, even from the start of the show, surrounded by the people, did it feel different, way different than a UFC show? Similar? Were the bigger stars? What would it be at all comparable to what you've covered in your career, be it UFC or whatever, or it's just like a totally different animal altogether?
It's almost like the thing was so big that it started to lose something along the way. I can't really explain this, but how sometimes a Super Bowl or something like that is built up and there's so much going on, it's such an overstimulation that by the time it happens, you feel like it's a letdown. Yeah. It almost had that vibe, but the fight itself actually saved it, because like I said, it was competitive enough to make it, to have something where you could come out of it thinking, we got our money's worth, that sort of thing. But it was different in the sense, like, you almost expect crazy things to happen because of the buildup being as big as it was, and the amount of media and the amount of attention on it, and every casual fan paying attention to it, not wanting to be left out of the party essentially. And so it was different in that sense. It was so big that it almost made you numb. And I don't think I've ever been to it was so big in terms of the scope and how many eyes were on it, I should say. I don't know about how big it was in terms of two guys that you were positive were going to put on a devastating war against each other or something like that. But with some of the bigger UFC events, though, because you're so well within an MMA bubble, the bigger, the fight is just inherently big. Everything just seems really huge, and you kind of get that big moment as they're coming out, and it just feels very centric to the moment, and you're like, oh, this is crazy, here we go. So I feel like that's kind of the difference. For a big MMA event, you just, it's like you've been wanting it. I think that's really the thing, right? You've been wanting to see the two guys if it's a big fight. Yeah. You've been wanting to see what happens when they cross. This is a weird one because I don't know how many people were pining for it. It's just one of those.
I wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the difference. But there was so many eyes on it. It was hard to determine why you cared. Yeah. And what levels you cared and why and all that stuff. So it didn't have the same emotional connection, I think, to the big UFC fights.
Now, one of my favorite stories you wrote was from early this year about the rise and fall of the Blackzilians gym. Now, how are you able to cultivate, the large assortment of sources you had from within the camp for that story? As a journalist trying to break in, like I mentioned, for aspiring ones listening out there, what tips can you give for a writer writing a feature article like that to get all those sources? Is it a time thing? You just meet people over the years? Like, how did you pull that one off? Because there were a lot of different people you talked to for that story, and it made it great.
Those are always very difficult because you know how today's world is, man. You're expected to uphold a certain amount of stuff weekly. Yeah. Like you're expected to as my job, I'm going to be commenting some kind of column. I'm doing lead up stuff. I'm doing the MMA beat. I'm doing all this stuff. So these bigger stories, they become a little bit harder as time goes on. And honestly, for that particular one, I just, if you've been following along a little bit, you knew that like there was some, I remember Rashad Evans was on a show and he kind of was saying like, yeah, we kind of separated gyms. He was just kind of casually talking about what was going on over there. And for that particular one, I heard that and I thought I should find out what's going on, or try to get in touch with some people and figure out what's going on. And I started with Glenn Robinson and talked to him, and and like you're mentioning, how do you get that? I just have these connections from for years of dealing with them. I've been down to Florida a couple of times for pieces, Vitor and stuff like that, at the Blackzilians. So I was familiar with the people. I had talked to them in the past. And you just, at some point, you just have their, you have their trust in their phone numbers and stuff. So I just started from that process and talked to him. And as he kind of poured it out, it was like an hour-long conversation. So I didn't know it was going to be a longer form piece. I thought it was just going to be a standard feature where I kind of give his side of the story. But as he told me all this, I realized I had to go back then and cross-examine it with other people's versions of what was going on. And that's really how that one developed, because he told me so many things, and so much of it I couldn't even include in there as to what was going on. A lot of it was very emotional. So I felt like at that point I better talk to, Henry Hooft and I forget who else. I mean, there was a lot of guys I talked to, Cavalcante, all these guys. So I just put together that, 8 or 9 interviews, and then I looked at all of it, and I just kind of broadly in my mind said, how do I want to present this, And as I looked at it, I thought I'd just start here, and then here's where you want to get to. And I just had this basic idea of an outline, and then I just kind of started infusing all the quotes along with just tying the story together until it was done. So it wasn't very magical, man. It was just, it was very basic. But I've had a lot of experience, obviously, with the longer form pieces, so I kind of know how to do it. They're a pain in the ass to do, but if you get the time to do them, they're always more rewarding, I think.
All right, now I know you're stretched for time. I'll give you a couple of quick questions, real quick ones, quick answers. What are the 3 moments that stand out the most for you as a pundit of the sport for the time you've done it?
Like just big moments in MMA?
Yeah, what just stands out? Like if you had 3 things that always will you remember, and it doesn't have to be a big moment of it, just something that stands out for you as a writer covering the sport.
Well, I still think, man, like there's a couple. UFC 117, when Chael Sonnen was winning that fight for Anderson Silva all the way into the 5th round, and just to see him turn the tables, to see Silva come back. I still to this day have never seen anything that just shut. It was the craziest thing at the moment, because you're just like, you're seeing a narrative switch. Everything that you'd accepted as you're watching as how the landscape's going to change switches back. And then you have to then remember that all of a sudden Anderson Silva just put a notch into his legend by doing that. I was like, this is crazy, man. Like, to me, that was one of the classic crazy moments of MMA, and shows you how things can change just like that. So I would definitely have that in there. What else, man? Like the Gustafsson-Jon Jones fight, to me, is a big one, because in my mind, still, in terms of, just watching it take place in a state of awe, that's still the one that comes to my mind, because I was ringside for that, cage side for that one, and just to see, like I always say, a good fight has like actual plot twists to it, like where the plot keeps changing. I felt like that fight had that, just kept going, and then you saw Jon Jones dig deep. late in that fight to take it. I thought that was phenomenal, man. Like, to me, that was, and that's why it's a shame given Jon Jones, like, he has obviously he has that competitive side that makes him great, man. And that's what makes it so sad that when he's outside the cage, he can't maintain himself, man. So that one too is sticks out there. And there's so many others, but I would say that the one that will always stay with me too is just because she was this women's pioneer, was just seeing Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm. Yeah, man. When that first round was playing out and you saw that she just had nothing for Holly Holm, how surreal was that? I mean, it was like, because it was just, you had this person who was basically, we had deified, put her on the pedestal, like everybody had deified her as this invincible force in women's MMA, like the Mike Tyson of the women's world. I mean,
people were talking about her fighting Floyd Mayweather.
I know. Yeah, remember that? Like, that's how crazy it was. And to see in that first round that she just didn't have anything for Holly Holm, and then to see it, that punctuation mark in the second round and watch her go down, I felt like, I don't know how you guys felt. Again, it was more of an industry thing too, because the industry's flourishing with her in it, and all of a sudden she goes down. You're like, I just remember thinking, how does this sport change now? I mean, what happens now? Like, this is crazy. Like, so that to me, man, was just, I'll always remember that. And it also it kind of was a reminder in this sport how cruel and swift things can change, and that you can only kind of deify people for so long. There's always going to be that person. The person who's coming up to take you out is already there. They're already making their way towards you. So I felt like that was a good reminder of that. But man, what a drastic one that one was, man. So I would say those three, if we're counting on just big signature moments of the sport.
Now I have two quick questions for both of you. A quick yes or no, and get to plugs and we can wrap it up. A quick question for you and Phil. Chuck, does Conor McGregor fight in the UFC again within the next year?
Yeah, I say he will. I can't imagine this thing was already a digression, right? So it's like he made his big money. I think that for him to maintain his belt and to go back to his bread and butter, he's going to have to. I think he for sure will.
Phil, what do you think?
Nah, he loves that sport too much not to go back to it, and obviously he's stated that multiple times. I think he'll go back in December to fight Diaz for the third time, if not, and maybe at the latest or at the latest he'll probably be like January. But I definitely see him getting back into the octagon.
Even if he can't make going from 30+ million, if he has to fight really dangerous men for only $3 to $5 million, he's still gonna come back that quick.
I think that he's going to have to gauge that, right? Like, because even Dana White, like, that was a big question of mine. I think Dana White was addressing it. Like, look, I think they're going to have to pay him a lot more. He's going to have to be tied in intricately to the pay-per-view structure and all the stuff that the UFC makes money on, like literally a partner with him.
Which he wanted. He wanted years ago.
Exactly. Yep. And I think that's what they're dealing with now, and they'll have to figure that out. But I do believe that through this whole process, that's one thing the UFC is adamant on. As long as he's winning, as long as he's a title holder, I think that they'll give him license to make a lot more than he was in the UFC.
Now, for both you also, Chuck, is if Jon Jones can return, and let's say he's out for 2 years for the suspension, does he come back and can he become a champion again? And two, if he can, is his championship reign next at 205 or heavyweight?
Wow, man. It's so crazy because now it's like so up in the air. So if we're saying 2 years from now at 32 years old, comes back, I think he would obviously Daniel Cormier is not very young, man. I mean, at some point he's not going to be around. So I think that ship has probably sailed, but the Gustafsson fight would still be there. But my guess is, man, if he's coming back in 2 years, he's probably going to heavyweight. I think you'd need a complete reinvention at that point. So I would put my money in that he's head to heavyweight.
Phil?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. He's going to lose some tactical skills. He's going to lose some athleticism just from age. And maybe he'll lose some, of his spark. But he really wasn't. He's not a real physicality type fighter. He just he does know how to pick his shots and do his thing. So, I see him coming back at heavyweight. Not as dominant, but he'll come back. Hopefully he doesn't mess up the next time, but we'll see.
Yep.
All right, I mean, that's it. I really thank you, Chuck, so much for being on the show. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Is there anything you want to plug, like your Twitter, if people aren't following you, which they totally show your Twitter, if you have Instagram, Facebook, anything you want to let the fans know about that are listening?
Well, if you want to see completely worthless tweets.
Ooh, who doesn't like that?
Yeah, well, I try to keep it a little more irreverent, as you guys probably know, man. But I'm just at my name, Chuck Mindenhall, and I just try to keep it fun, man. Just try to view the game from a little bit more of an elevation than a lot of the people who are just dealing in the everyday stuff and getting bogged down by it. So I try to keep it up there, man. And honestly, as long as I can do that, it's going to remain fun for me. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, no problem, man.
Phil,
Yeah.
your social media before we go?
Yeah, same as always. Daru Strong on everything except for Snapchat. We got Daru Strong 1. Also, if you haven't done so yet, you want to sign up for my weekly newsletter, go to darustrong.com. You can opt in there.
All right, thank you again, Chuck Mindenhall. Check him out on theringer.com, MMAfighting.com. The guy knows what he's talking about. Fantastic. I am Jason Burgos. He's the expert in strength and conditioning, Phil Drew. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye now.